Truth, logic, action, power. It's the GreggHoush show here on New Revolutionary Radio. From the Leonard School in Malden, Massachusetts, Gregg and company are here to bring a sense of ethics to your news. Whether it's politics, activism, or current events, we always seek to inform and never to deceive. Let's start the show.
Hi, and welcome to episode 12 of the GreggHoush show. Finally, with a website that you can actually visit at GreggHoush.com. So, today I am here with my kind of standard crew of co-hosts, Kayla, Mac, and Derek.
Daddy, it's back in Mac. Mickey
Back
Mac.
in Mac. And guest co-host here, Liam.
Hey, glad to be here finally.
And our special guest, Adam Friedman of Voter Choice MA.
Thanks for having me, Gregg.
Absolutely. So today we are going to talk, of course, about ranked choice voting. The reason Adam is actually here. We're also going to talk about a few of the current subjects, updates on Russia, the Mueller investigation, the Virginia shooting, Sessions having a session. All of this fun stuff.
I do declare, I have never talked with no Russian, and if I did, which I definitely didn't.
Except for that time and that other time.
Except for when I hosted a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, and asked them out to dinner. So we'll be getting to all of that a little later in the show, but I definitely want to open up with our guest here. So our guest, Adam, we actually have met a couple times, but the first, I'd say, one or two times we met were kind of in passing. Right?
That's right.
Random events through kind of mutual friends, but never really got to know each other. And then I helped throw an event in Cambridge here at Harvard Square where he showed up to represent Voter Choice MA.
That's right. To
an audience of a bunch of other groups. And we got to hang out afterward. And I got to find out that, kind of one of my pet causes that I've been, watching, trying to help with as much as I can since like the early 90s when, Fair Vote really first appeared with the idea of even thinking we could get away with it here in America, popped up. He's doing that here in our state. And so we became friends, talked a little. He's been keeping me up to date on the status of things. And the miracle has happened that Voter Choice MA has actually gotten the ranked choice voting onto the Democratic platform here in Massachusetts, as I understand it. Only in the last couple weeks, too, right? This is very new.
June 3rd, the State Democratic Convention.
Wait, so it already happened?
It already happened.
So what happened at it?
So what happened at it was... Well, we can start there, or we can go back to the beginning.
Well, you said June 3rd, and it's...
Well, yeah, so it's on the platform now. It's a thing that they're actually going to push for, and that they all get to talk about and not, feel dirty at this point because it's part of the platform. I'm sure a lot of people here have that are listening have all the questions of what's ranked choice voting, and maybe these smarter ones are saying, what's instant runoff voting and what's preferential voting and what's the 50 other things people have called systems similar to this.
I've heard of none of those.
Well, I mean, we're kind of used to that here, aren't we?
Well, I've heard of like Fair Vote or whatever, the Fair Choice Vote.
Well, Fair Vote is a nonprofit organization where, one of its founding board members, Chris Novoselic, the former bassist of Nirvana, kind of the first big political thing he did before going up and running for offices and whatnot. But here in Massachusetts, what we're actually going to end up with is what is actually called ranked choice voting, which is its own flavor of the preferential voting system. So I would love it if, in your words, since you've had to do this so many times, you could kind of explain it to our audience. What is ranked choice voting?
Absolutely, Gregg. So ranked choice voting is really a synonym for the academic term single transferable vote. And the single transferable vote can be applied to both single seat offices like governor, like a state rep seat, mayor, what have you, or multi-seat offices such as a city council or a school board. So Cambridge uses a multi-seat flavor of ranked choice voting to elect their at-large city council, and it turns into proportional representation when it's used in that context.
Is that pretty new in Cambridge?
No, it's actually the oldest city still standing using this. 1941 is when they began
It's a great year.
using
Great year.
proportional representation, single transferable vote.
So how does the voting work for this? You know,
Yeah,
what makes it better? How does it work?
One just more point on the terminology there. Instant runoff voting was kind of the term that's been used, that Fair Vote invented, put it on the map, starting in the early 90s, and particularly in the year 2000, when we had the spoiled election in Florida in the presidential race with Ralph Nader, Al Gore, and George W. Bush. And from that point on, instant runoff voting was kind of touted as, a way to solve this problem of the spoiler and of vote splitting. Ranked choice voting is just a little bit of a rebrand where advocates have thought, let's focus more on the voter's experience rather than, system level how it's tabulated. But it's the same thing. It's really the same thing for the single seat offices. So here's how it works. So the current way that we vote, you just pick one candidate and that's it, right? I call it the pick one and pray system. If it's a particularly crowded field, there could be 5, 6, 10 candidates. Some of these open seats for state Senate or U.S. Congress have a lot of candidates. It's kind of a gamble if you only have one vote, because there could be 3 or 4, pretty good candidates that have their base. And so a lot of voters are in this dilemma in the crowded field scenario where they want their vote to count. So they want to vote for someone who's viable, who has a chance of winning. And the straits are even more dire if you really like a candidate who's not very popular, like in a 3 or 4 way race, like a Green Party or a Libertarian or an Independent.
Or anyone named Nader.
Or anyone named, yeah, exactly. We won't mention names.
Yes.
That by voting for them, you're throwing your vote away. You're wasting your vote. So it puts voters in a big disadvantage, and it doesn't allow everyone's voice to be heard, and people can't vote honestly. And so we're actually getting false results at the ballot where people who would vote third party or would vote for new and fresh ideas are not doing so because they want their vote to count. So that's kind of the main problem that it solves. So here's the quick elevator pitch of how we go talk about it to folks. And Kayla, you not hearing about it is par for the course. That's the big mountain that we have to climb.
I mean, like the preferential treatment voting and all the other ones.
The
the terminology, because there's a lot of syllables, and I can't do too many syllables.
Okay, that's kind of on you. But yeah,
Except for syllables.
It's like when you get into these long-winded words, I'm just like, boring.
Right, keep it to 2. Yeah, so like our elections, when we have more than 2 candidates, our system tends to break down. So here's how we explain it. So in the current system, you only get to vote for one. With ranked choice voting, it's very simple. You get to vote for multiple candidates and you get to rank them in the order that you prefer them. You get to have a first choice, second choice, third choice. As many candidates as there are on the ballot, you get to select and rank in the order that you prefer them. And so this solves this problem of the spoiler and the vote splitting and crowded field, because you can vote for whoever you want to first, just like you do now. You can vote honestly because you always have a series of backup choices. So if your first choice does not have the support to continue, your vote transfers. It stays in play, and it's never thrown away. And so that's a basic benefit that people really love.
Like in this example, a lot of people who voted for Hillary thinking that there was no way, if they were using this in Hillary versus Bernie, could have put Bernie first, Hillary second, knowing that, well, Hillary's probably going to win, but I really want Bernie. But what this does is it now makes a lot more people vote Bernie first. And, not only for him in that situation, but in other situations, as I see it, it really empowers the third party in that they're no longer the biggest fear of the 2 parties. They're still going to probably get more votes, not only at the top, but in position 2 and position 3. But the third parties get to have some of those first position votes because you don't think you're throwing your vote away by voting for them.
Exactly. You can vote for them safely.
Yeah, without thinking that you're throwing your vote away. Even if you want to consider it a protest vote, even if you're that person, you're still able to have an effect on the election.
That's right.
So when people vote in these orders, and specifically, let's say they're ranking 4 people, they're going to say, this is the person I really want to win. if that person doesn't have a chance, then this person, then this person. And when they go to tabulate all of this, the way it actually works is they look for first round, they look for a majority. If there's already a majority, that person just won the game. Game over, winner. But if there's no actual majority that meets, that election's specific idea of majority, then, because, in a lot of these areas, some cities, some counties, whatnot, that are trying to play with this, their idea of the amount of majority needed to just end it right there is different. But when you get that majority, that one won. If you don't get that majority, then in the one that we might end up with here in Massachusetts, if we're so lucky, they knock out the last person. So your fourth vote goes away and then they retabulate. Then your third vote goes away, then they retabulate. And they keep knocking your last vote away until someone has a majority.
That's right. Another way to say it is they eliminate the lowest vote getter in each round. So it's like a series of runoffs done instantly in one election.
Like a super
And the
crackdown for
tabulations can just
voting.
happen for a computer like that. Like they just boom,
under a
say that guy
second.
won.
It happens practically instantaneously. It's trivial for a computer to tabulate.
So one of the things that we're going to do for the people who might still be shaking their head as to what the hell we're talking about is we're going to link you to the voter choice website and to our website, where there's this amazing graphic that just dumbs it down to a point where anyone's going to understand exactly how this works. And, it's always been one of those things where I would look at fairvote.org, the group, that kind of really first tried to champion this for America. And their explanations were so academic for so many years that I couldn't use their material to reference anything. So it's really nice to see, like when I first saw this graphic that's up on your website, it was clear that, oh, wow, someone finally figured out how to distill this down to something that everyone I know will understand.
3 syllables or less. That's what
I
I'm
know,
saying.
you've got to get it down there.
Yeah, less words is better.
So we mentioned earlier that, ranked choice voting is now on the Democratic platform in Massachusetts. And for a lot of listeners out there, those are just words. What does that actually mean, that it's on the platform? Does that, in terms mean that they're literally going to try and get it passed at a state level, at a level where it's just for this type of election? Or does it mean that people can run on it now? Like, what does it mean?
It does not change the law in any way, shape, or form. This is an internal party matter. But it's like planting a flag in the ground and making a big statement that has resonance across the state and across the political class. The Democratic Party, if anyone's familiar with Massachusetts politics, they control over 80% of the seats in both the state Senate and the state House of Representatives.
In multiple of them, they don't even get run against. Whoever they decide to nominate, they get it.
That's right. And moreover, in our state, we are tied for last place with how little competition there is for state house seats. We're 49th or 50th in the country for who runs against mostly Democrats. So for us, the win, getting this on the platform, is currency. Whenever we approach an elected a politician, we can open with, hey, by the way, your party has this on their platform, so you're going to want to know about this and you're going to want to support this. So it would make them look very bad not to, particularly if we go into the media in talking about it, and if there's any Democrats that are not supporting it or making statements against, which some will, we can always ensure that they know they don't look very smart doing that.
So does it being on the platform mean that it is endorsed by the party at this point, at that level? So,
yes, it is. That's
if you're running for that party and getting that party's ticket, then the party that you are currently running as is endorsing it. So you should probably endorse it.
That's correct.
And so when these candidates that might come out for that party to take a seat don't, you can call them out on it now, basically, is one of the things that gets you.
That's right. Now, the reason it doesn't translate into law is because there are a few things on the party platform that legislators actively oppose and have opposed. And there's two salient examples. One is same-day registration, also known as election day registration, where people can register at the polls with some ID and then just cast their vote that day. There's several lawmakers who do not want that because they live in districts that have high transient populations, such as Alston, Brighton, which has BU and other schools. They don't want some kind of dark horse candidate whipping up student sentiment, and then they all register and vote and then knock them out of office that day. And he's been very explicit with some of our volunteers that go on these lobby days that's why he doesn't want it. It's very self-interested.
Yeah,
Flagrantly
it's not for the
self-interested.
state. It's literally for the individual.
That's right, for
Yeah.
this. Yeah. So the second one, and this is a big one, the state of Massachusetts, we enjoyed a system called clean elections, which is a system of public financing of elections, which is you want to run for office, so you run around and get a bunch of $5 contributions, and the state kicks in a big grant so that you have money to work with to run a competitive campaign, and you never have to do private fundraising. And in fact, you're barred from doing private fundraising. You can only use that same amount. So it levels the playing field. When I was an undergrad at BU, we had this system. There's one state senator still in the state house that ran and won with it, Jamie Eldridge. And this has been on the Democratic platform since the 90s. They passed it by ballot 2-1 in 1998. And then over the course of the several years, Democratic leaders of the House, mostly, and some of the Senate, basically defunded it and eventually repealed it on a series of voice votes. So that doesn't bode well in terms of, it's not like we're assured victory because it's in the party platform, but it's certainly a powerful statement to the grassroots in the Democratic Party, to electeds who are on the fence about ranked choice voting, and of course to the general public.
So as legislation now, that's a whole different beast. You've actually got to draft legislation. You've got to, there's a lot to that. You don't just sit down and write a bill. There's standards, there's practices, there's all this other fun stuff you've got to do to really write legislation. And in every state, it's slightly different too. So you've got that, institutional memory of how to do that and all that other fun stuff built into getting a bill drafted that might make this law in this state. Have you guys worked towards that? Do you have a draft bill? And,
Yes.
Has it gone before them before?
Yes. There's I'm trying to remember the exact number, but it's something like 98% of all bills filed never see the light of day. Bills are filed over and over again in the state house, and I'm sure in many state houses around the country.
You have to get co-sponsor after co-sponsor
right.
until you finally get, 30 of them, and then it might actually see the light of day.
Maybe, and that's funny
if
that you
you're
mentioned
lucky.
30 because we have 34 co-sponsors for our ranked choice voting.
I might research a little.
Yeah, very good. For our ranked choice voting local option bill, we have that bill, and then we have a second bill, which is statewide ranked choice voting. So we do have two bills. The local option bill does have 34 co-sponsors, and we're scheduled for a legislative briefing in the House Members Lounge on the 27th of June. So that'll be exciting because we're going to bring some free food, which always brings more legislators out to check it out. And we'll give them some more information about it because like the general public, legislators are not that up to speed with what ranked choice voting is all about and why it's so transformative.
And sometimes it's not their fault. It's literally they've got the focus that their people voted them in for. Hopefully that's what they're focusing on. I mean, there's some that aren't. But, there's people like, my favorites, like Mike Connolly, people like that who got in there and are trying to do exactly why they were voted in. He, I think, does really understand this issue. But, when he first got there, he might not have. But his people care about it being from Cambridge.
That's right.
But, there's a lot up there who have a lot of other issues they need to focus on because it's why they were put there. So I understand them not knowing about this problem or understanding the intricacies of it. But at the same time, this is better for the voters. For some legislators, it's not going to be better for them because they're going to lose office because, we're going to get so many more options and the ability to vote for who we really want to vote for instead of just who we think might win.
That's right.
So for a voter, what does this do in terms of a voter? Does this give them more rights? Does this give them more options in a way where, how does this empower voters?
Exactly right. We're facing a lot of problems in our elections. I mean, we all saw the presidential election, what a fiasco that was. The kind of fear, dread, loathing of the voter having to face a general election with two of the most reviled major party nominees in recent memory. But yet, to avoid Trump at all costs, they had to hold their nose and vote Hillary Clinton, many of these voters. And we still didn't, the Clinton folks, the Democrats still didn't win.
Mind-blowing.
And this is a theme that comes up again and again, and this is a voting rights issue. Surely we have the right to vote. Most people, if you're not facing Jim Crow residual laws like voter ID in some of the southern states, but we don't have the right to a vote that counts, and we don't have a right to a ballot that expresses the nuance of how we actually feel about the candidates. Our ballots are primitive. Our system is broken, and it breaks down when there's more than 2 candidates in the race. Now, what people deal with this in a number of really toxic ways. One is we blame candidates for staying in a race because they're spoilers. So we blame them. Ralph Nader used to be a national hero. He was a consumer rights advocate.
Thanks for the seatbelts.
60s and 70s. Yeah, thanks for saving tens of thousands of lives on the highway. After that election in 2000, he became vilified. It was political suicide. He became completely ostracized.
Even though it wasn't true.
Yeah, I was just gonna say
Even
it was a
though-
Fox News narrative
Exactly.
that they used.
Exactly.
Even though it wasn't true, that was irrelevant to the fact that it was a good enough example for them to tout out and to really play up.
That's right. There was another reason. I'm just going with this is the mainstream
Absolutely.
thinking that we're left with.
Truth
Now-
hasn't stopped them before.
That's right. And it's not just candidates we're blaming. We see this at local elections too. I'm in meetings where, there's progressive Democrats, for instance, and they're trying to figure out, we have a really strong candidate for state rep, but then this other guy wants to run. How can we pressure that other guy to drop out to make way for our candidate so we're sure that they win? And to
Can we offer him a seat somewhere? Can we offer him a cabinet position?
Whatever.
Can we offer him some money for his next campaign? Like,
Yeah,
what can we do?
And there was a case. Now there's a racial justice piece here at local elections. 2013, the Boston mayoral race, for the first time, had a whole host of candidates of color running. There were 6 candidates of color running. But who won that preliminary top 2 election is 2 white Irish men in stereotypical Boston fashion. And if you see the numbers, it was voters of color from Roxbury, Mattapan, Dorchester, Jamaica Plain were all splitting up the vote among these 6 candidates of color. And the Globe found out that the leader, Charlotte Ritchie, her supporters were getting together and trying to figure out how to get other candidates of color to drop out and make way for her. Now, Boston is a minority-majority city now. We should never be discouraging candidates of color from participating in a system that for so long they've been disenfranchised from. That's just more disenfranchised.
Absolutely. And if we're looking at it right now, we're looking at the next election. Tito Jackson is going to be running. And how many people are going to run against him that might split that vote?
In District 7 in particular, his former council seat,
Yep.
I think there are 13 candidates.
Yeah.
How many votes do voters get right now?
1.
1. With ranked choice voting, voters don't have to make this devil's bargain. They get to vote for a combination, a cluster. So it unifies and consolidates common voting blocks, not divides and fragments and pits people against each other. So we're also blaming voters. As well as we blame candidates, we blame these voters for voting third party, voting green. And so ranked choice voting is a great fix for that.
Now, I'd like to ask you a little bit more of an esoteric question on elections regarding specifically the idea of preference voting, the various forms thereof. So, of course, single transferable vote is only one of many different systems that have been created for choosing candidates based off of ranking of preference. And there's a very famous criterion, the Condorcet criterion, about choosing the winners of elections under such methods. And basically, there's a bunch to it, but I'm sure you're familiar. There's 2 major criteria, essentially. There's the Condorcet loser criterion, wherein if hypothetically this were a runoff between any pair of the candidates, if there's one candidate that would lose to every other candidate in the individual runoff, then that candidate is called the Condorcet loser, and a Condorcet method of voting would ensure that that person cannot win. And matching that, there's the Condorcet winner, who is the person who would win in every single runoff. Now, of course, not every election is going to have a Condorcet winner or a Condorcet loser, but if there is one, it seems kind of an intuitive way of saying, well, this person should obviously win or this person should lose. Now, I know that single transferable vote meets the loser criterion, but does not meet the winner criterion. So I wanted your views on why you think that single transferable vote is in particular the method of preference voting that we should be advocating for.
Good question. According to Arrow's impossibility theorem, there is no perfect voting system.
Of course.
So single transferable is as susceptible. And there's a lot of academic folks who study voting theory, mathematics, and looking at other forms of voting, such as range voting, which I think was renamed score voting, approval voting, which is a variant of that, Buckland voting, board account, and on and on and on and on. There's a lot of, and Condorcet, raw Condorcet with like Battle of the Bands is kind of how it works.
What if we just put like candidates' names on puppies and let puppies decide? Because like, who can say no to a puppy?
Well, I mean, how are you choosing the winner from among the puppies? Are you gonna like
Whoever
have
gets,
them
like-
battle to the death, or like race around a track, or like what are we
We
going
could
with here?
we could bring back dog racing. I voted to keep it, but we could also like whoever gets who finds the bone first, like because that would be the smartest puppy and candidate.
The most
I'm
bones
just saying
shall
like
win.
that would be like a good happy medium. Like, no one hates puppies unless you're an asshole or a terrorist or Derek.
Michael
Like,
Vick. Michael Vick.
He's an asshole, so there you go.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. He fit. All right. So,
That's a good point. Well, I wanted to respond to this. I mean,
respond.
there's so many criteria that determine what is the perfect voting system.
Of course.
You're right. Ranked choice voting, single transferable vote is not a perfect system by any means. They all have their quirks. What the big advantage that it has is that it's the only system of these alternatives that has a long track record, or really any track record, in real political elections around the world. So we do get letters from time to time. We get people that come to events and say, I think range voting theoretically meets there's various criteria, and IRV or ranked choice voting misses this problem. If we know that in real elections it solves this problem, voters are using it and they're happy with it. And the one thing that these academics agree on is that the first past the post, pick one and pray system is so bad that anything is of great improvement on it. That's our position. We're much more pragmatic about it. We want to go with what's working and what's already in the field. If we switch to something like range, we'd have a whole host of messaging things to do first, to prepare, to then start educating the public, and then get politicians to buy in. And we already have enough mountain to climb to get off of plurality as it is.
I think that's a pretty solid answer. I mean, certainly pragmatism in terms of, well, anything is an improvement over what we have, and go with what is already been shown to work rather than trying to create additional mountains does make sense as a response, even though I personally do prefer some of the other methods.
Yeah, and I've talked to some of the folks like Center for Election Science, and I said, I will help you guys organize politically around these alternative systems. Talk to me. We've done a tremendous job with ranked choice in Massachusetts. We've picked up a lot of good tips on how to do it. Let's do it. That's a form of intelligence too. A lot of people say, I'm smarter because I know theoretically a better system in their mind. But it's also, there's political intelligence. Do you know how to actually get it through the puzzle that is legislative process or a ballot question process?
I think one thing, like, politically not to do is have Jill Stein try to run your messaging. I really think she did a lot of damage for it.
Really?
It's just everything she says is like just spews like elitism. And I know a lot of people that just anytime she opened her mouth was like, shut up.
I do know a lot of people who feel that way, that, she comes off as this just rich elite who doesn't understand my problems.
That's what happens when you grow up in Lexington.
Well, yeah. I mean, I lived in Lexington. You know this. I met these people. I met these people. I don't know. I'm a big fan of ranked choice voting simply because, a lot of the reasons that Adam's already stated here, but we have examples of it actually getting through even recent, legislative battles in our country. And, none of the other systems do we really have anything that we can back it up. Although, let's talk Maine, because, it got through, boom, win, big, but now the big but. Now the Maine Supreme Court is saying it violates our Constitution, and you can't do that. And now it's kind of in this weird limbo. I mean, do you have any updates that
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Well, so it wasn't just a bill. This was by ballot. And this, for a lot of folks who've been following ranked choice voting, they're always like, it's confined to 11 cities around the country. It's never going to be big. It's taken 20 years. But now the first state in U.S. history Maine, passes it statewide. I mean, that's a huge win, and that's the wind that's been at our backs in Massachusetts. We want to be next. Now, in terms of, so the voters passed it. The state house asked the Maine Supreme Court to weigh in. They gave their advisory opinion. What the headlines don't tell you is that only 3 out of the 10 covered offices, covered race contest types, are in violation. 7 out of them are not in violation in any way, shape, or form. So what the Constitution...
Right. And what we're talking about is in violation of the way their Constitution, very clearly words how these elections have to be run.
Uses the word plurality.
It uses the word plurality. And but it only covers it for state-level offices, general elections. So that means governor, that means state Senate, and state House of Representatives.
Treasurer, things like that.
Well, Maine, I don't believe that they elect those executive offices. But that's only 3 types. Now, the law enacted by the people in November also calls for ranked choice voting for U.S. Senate, for U.S. Congress, both primaries and generals. Those are not impacted by this constitutional problem at all. And they also call for primary elections for those 3 state-level offices I cited: governor, state Senate, and state House. So those should be fair game. Those should be ready to go. And frankly, according to the law, it is incumbent upon the state House and the Secretary of State to implement this law. And it should be severable, where they could leave out the 3 parts that are in violation.
Right. So that was my big question. Is the goal to leave them out or to amend the Constitution?
This is where we're now faced with the political reality of such a transformative change to our democracy, in that you have some vociferous opponents in the state house that are running scared, desperate to use this media controversy as cover to push for a full repeal, which of course advocates are saying it's disgusting. It's an insult to voters.
And literally, they're doing it to try and hold their seats because they know they're going to lose their seats if this goes through.
Sure.
And it may have a disgusting governor running that state, so it kind of makes sense why they would try to repeal it.
That's right.
But it's what the people want.
Yeah, exactly. No, I know a lot of people who live in Maine who are like, we passed it to get him out.
So there's 3 possible paths forward. There's a bill that calls for a constitutional amendment to make the Constitution conform to the will of the people and amend that plurality and make it majority or leave it out.
So the best possible solution
would be
this.
Then there's the worst possible, which is full repeal. Then there's the middle road, which is sever the violating parts and just do not. If the legislature does nothing, those are severed, and then the 7 covered contests would go forward with ranked choice voting statewide.
Do you have, in being so close to this one, do you have any idea the direction this is heading? No. Have you talked to people?
This is the fog of war that is.
Like I said, we're really in limbo. Like
we really are.
In looking at it all, I couldn't find anyone giving even, good odds on any of them. Like you just don't know.
Don't know.
So right now we've got the first win, but that win is in serious limbo because the powers that be like being the powers that be.
That's right.
Also, Trump winning, really threw a kerfuffle for a lot of people. So a lot of people can't even focus on things that they're doing. I know my state rep, he had a great bill that he was prepared to reintroduce, but now that Trump is fucking everything up, he's like, well, I don't even know if this bill is going to be viable with Trump in office, because it was a paid healthcare family medical leave bill for Massachusetts. But if health insurance explodes, well, then his bill that he spent 5 years working on will just disintegrate into thin air. So it's everyone is kind of in this weird limbo for everything, because they just don't know how states can even budget and operate in the next year.
Let alone anything else. Well, hopefully he's gone by then,
He either has a heart attack or...
I'm not going to talk about the president dying. I'm just going to say hopefully he's gone.
His diet is terrible and he doesn't exercise.
And I'm hoping it's through impeachment and resignation with his tail between his legs. But that's a whole nother conversation. Maybe we can have it, in the next hour. There's still, ranked choice voting, sure. The audience now kind of understands what it is and knows that there is this giant win in Maine that now might be a giant win, question mark. But... there's still a lot of pieces to this that we haven't covered, in empowering the voters and giving them the ability to, fight basically what happened here in Boston, where we did end up with, those 2 Irishmen, when in reality, we probably would have ended up with a person of color if we had had this voting system. you know, I look at this as a solution to some of the gerrymandering issues. And, you know, beyond going with just straight popular vote, you know, this is a way to fight that. And so, you know, have you guys talked about that? Is that, you know, some of the points you try and make? Like, I haven't read much from, you know, you specifically on that point.
Yes. Ranked choice voting, being that it turns into proportional representation if there's a multi-seat office, would work really well to end gerrymandering once and for all. And that is, you have larger districts with more seats available so that if 30% of those voters are red, are Republican, and there's 6 seats for that covering that district, then they get about 2 of the seats. They get about a third of the seats. And then if the rest are blue or Democrat, then they get the other 4. That way, you don't have to worry about trying to engineer these insanely wonky district lines. It takes it out of that realm completely because you have.
Well, it's not worrying about them. I mean, people are doing it on purpose. Like this is this is a college level course at this point. You know, it's 4 years of study to figure out how to gerrymander properly. You know, what street, literally, which block in Boston is the one that you now cut off and move, you know, move to South Boston, or you know, which area of, you know, Roxbury is now West Roxbury, you know, in order to, like, they do this as a data science.
That's right. We and this was Fair Vote's vision. Fair Vote was really after proportional representation. IRV, ranked choice voting, is a means to get there, to allow politicians and the general public to kind of get used to the idea of a more intelligent, expressive ballot through rankings. And we take the same position that they do. We see RCV or IRV as kind of the gateway into full-on PR, but we don't advocate for PR at this time because Americans just don't think a lot about the voting system. They don't envision a new way to do it. So we've got to help. I think
after the last election, you've got a little bit of a window where more of them are. I mean, is it enough of them? I don't know, but a lot more of them are.
That's correct. But we need to see more wins for just a simpler system like the single seat system and get that enacted and being used first before we want to take on head on the problem of gerrymandering,
this will be the first time I fight back because you know what? Fair Vote have been doing this for 20 plus years. I mean, we'll be at 30 years relatively soon for their attempts at that. And it's, can we get the small wins? And you know what? Sure, they've gotten small wins, but they've gotten this city, only this city council, this county.
That's right.
And you know, doing it that way, we're coming up on 30 years on, and what do they have?
What do they have to
40
show for
cities across the entire country,
not even,
and a few city councils.
Not even close, Gregg. 11.
So there you go.
That's brutal.
I mean, I really wanted you to make that point for me, like, you know, like.
No, I'm completely with you.
So the slow wins on the smaller points have gotten us nowhere so far.
Yeah.
So if your argument is let's keep going slow and get the small wins.
No. My argument is no.
Fight me on this one.
I will. No. So Fair Vote has been, and a lot of democracy reformers have kind of a posture of being conservative strategically. They don't want to go too much too fast. But I'm conservative. I'm pragmatic in terms of the public isn't ready for multi-member districts, and there's too much political, going to be too much political blowback to do multi-member districts. But I think that there is a lot of positives that can unify the public and politicians for solving the problem of vote splitting and spoilers. And that is a single seat issue where we could do ranked choice voting, and it's much easier to explain. It's much easier to explain the tabulation. So the benefit to the voter is like clear and present because they have that visceral pain of having to pick the lesser of two evils rather than someone they truly believe in. We just think it's, from a marketing standpoint, it's a much easier sell. And people can really embrace it much more readily. That's why we do that first, and then we would take the next phase.
I believe there are also some legal considerations with regards to changing from single representative districts to multi-member districts.
Yes.
Much like the issue with the Maine Constitution, many state constitutions were written with a pretty specific system in mind, and therefore have wording issues that would be very, very difficult to overcome without a constitutional amendment.
There's lots of state constitutions in our way.
That's correct. They actually prescribe that districts are single seat, and that's
how to draw the district.
So you would need that's right. You need a constitutional amendment to overcome that.
What does George Soros think about ranked choice?
If anyone has a connect with him, I would love to
Because
ask
I feel
him.
like that's what you're missing.
I mean,
Gregg?
I admit to nothing, mainly because this thing would be way better funded if I had a good connect to him.
Right? Because he did like say that he would spend like any amount possible to beat Trump during the 2016. So maybe he can help spend.
Trump was the beneficiary of a lot of crowded field Republican primaries early on. He was winning with around 30% of the vote in a lot of those early states. So yes. Also, Michael Bloomberg, remember he was considering a run as an independent, but he doesn't dare do so where he could split the vote from Hillary. And this is the problem. Bernie could have run as an independent in the general. Imagine how that race would have been different.
It would have been different, but I don't think as an independent he beats her or him. No, but I think as a Democrat, he beats Trump. I am one of those people.
But it would have changed the outcome, is my contention, and here's why. Him being in the race would have brought out the 2 million Democratic voters who otherwise stayed home because he wasn't in the race and they were disaffected.
I could not vote for Hillary.
But many would have. It could have been 30% of his voters.
I would have voted for Bernie.
If they had a ranked system.
I think
Bernie choice one.
I think on
Hillary,
a presidential level,
Hillary choice two.
I think we would have a lot bigger turnout on a presidential or general elections, like altogether, if just the president was a ranked choice vote.
Absolutely.
It's like you get millions more people because then they'd be able to say, well, I don't really like any of them, but if I have to,
Absolutely. So a great way to get a good funder is like Michael Bloomberg, billionaire. Let's talk to him. Hey,
so
do you
if
really
any
want
of
to
our
run?
listeners is Michael Bloomberg, please click on the link.
That's right, and help fund the second state to
I think
go
it might
choice.
cross some weird lines of the person who's supposed to be interviewing, but I will make some connections to both of them. Yes, if that is the need. Something you just said really leads me down another path. We talked about the fact that one of the big stumbling blocks for a lot of the pieces of electoral reform really is the state level constitutions. And in some regards, some of the federal constitutional rules as well, including things like the Electoral College and all that fun stuff, get in the way of all of this. Now, that leads me to really feel the need to bring up the Interstate Voting Compact, because that's actually pretty close. I mean, if it's coming up in Texas, it's coming up in 5 states in the next round of their legislative sessions, and if 3 of them, as long as one of them is Texas, actually pass it, it's enacted.
Wow.
So what does this do for all of those states that have constitutions that say no to this? Because if they sign on, they sign on, and I mean, there you go. They'll have to amend, or they'll have. I mean, how do we deal with that? Is this a thing that you've put much into?
Oh yeah. So what you're absolutely right. I mean, if the Interstate Compact dictates that the all states that are part of the compact will send their votes to whoever wins the national popular vote.
Wait, are we getting rid of Texas back to Mexico?
No, Texas is
Kayla.
actually looking like they might vote for this, which would be the national popular vote winning their electoral seats. And so you end up with a majority of the electoral seats going to the national popular vote.
So here ranked choice voting is actually because it can be instituted state by state, and each state does determine who gets the most votes for president within their borders. Mm-hmm. You could have a ranked choice contest in each state. A lot of people conflate this problem like, we can't do this nationally because you can't have one huge tabulation scheme for every voter around the country. That's not how you have to do it. And frankly, that's not really how the president's elected anyway. It is state by state. And the ballot access laws are such that you're not going to have a uniform palette of candidates across the country. Every state has a different mix. How much you can pay, like $100 to get on the presidential ballot in New Hampshire or something. Yeah. They have like 40 candidates who run for the job. I mean,
it's New Hampshire. They're the Florida of the North.
No one except every single presidential candidate pays any attention to New Hampshire.
Smarter in New Hampshire.
For some reason they all go there, but that
is a terrible state.
The Interstate Compact. Just to really break it down for the audience, there, it's. States have signed on to this piece of what will be legislation if they actually, enact it across enough states, whereby if a majority of the population of the United States, in terms of the states that actually signed the compact, actually sign the compact, then it gets enacted. So let's imagine, just throwing out numbers that are horribly wrong here. There's 300 million people in the U.S. If the states that actually enact this compact through their legislation tally more than 150 million, then the majority of the people in the states that have tallied it have now passed that threshold. So all the states that have passed it now are, legally bound by this compact to go with the national popular vote for their electoral college members.
Yes,
that's
yes.
The very basic breakdown of it.
The more precise is the states that hold a majority of the electoral votes in the electoral college. They agree to send theirs. And,
California, Texas, so on, so on. We know these people, Florida.
But it can be any combination that signs on to that
as long as we
compact.
get the majority of them, then they're all bound by actually going by the national popular vote, which, for any state not doing it at that point just basically makes that state's vote irrelevant. So I think a lot more states will pass it if the compact comes into actual action.
Oh, interesting.
There is
there will be states that kind of like, voting with the plurality problem, states won't want their vote not to matter. They will want their vote to matter, so they'll sign on after the fact just to say fine. I think it'll do that.
There is a legal problem potentially with the interstate compact as well, in that the Constitution specifically prohibits interstate compacts, but the situation is a bit more complicated than that because
multiple interstate compacts already exist.
they can enact interstate compacts with the approval of Congress.
Correct.
Which might be something of a problem with the national popular vote, but the national popular vote interstate compact isn't exactly an interstate compact because it's not actually an agreement between any specific group of states. It's every state saying, well, if enough states enact this, then we enact it.
Correct. It is called an interstate compact for ease of use.
Let me file a correction. That's actually not how it works.
Okay.
So it's a little bit
close.
complicated. It's close. What the states that sign on to it, you add up all their electoral votes, those that agree to it, and the compact is activated. This notion that they're all going to send their electoral votes to the popular winner when the number of states' electoral votes that have signed onto it equal a majority of electoral votes in the entire college.
Correct.
So what they're doing essentially is overriding the will of the votes that have not.
But interstate compacts in terms of ones that have actually been attempted in the past have been literal contracts signed between states, whereas this one is not a literal contract signed between states. This is a state's legislation saying that if this happens, we'll go along with everyone. But it's not
no agreement.
It's not Texas and Massachusetts saying, here's the contract that we've both signed.
I see.
And that's the thing that the Congress has to allow. So this interstate compact is called interstate compact because it's so close to the same thing that it's what people want to call it. But in reality, an interstate compact requires that the states all sign the same agreement. Whereas in this one, each state is making their own version of it through their legislation that says the same thing. But Texas's isn't relying on California to sign Texas's paperwork, which a real interstate compact would require all the states to sign the same piece of legislation.
To go with the example of a real world interstate compact, there is one between New York and New Jersey regarding establishment of an authority to manage waterways that are bordering both New York and New Jersey. And so they had to get permission from the federal government via Congress to create this organization just to administer this area that incorporates both New York and New Jersey jurisdiction. But it's specifically between New Jersey and New York. That's why it's an interstate
shut it down.
compact.
You just need Chris Christie.
So what we have here with this version of an interstate compact is something that kind of skirts around that congressional need. I think Congress still comes at them for that, but they don't have a sound legal standing in that. The law is pretty clear on, this has to be a contract between states, whereas this is just an idea out in the air that if the rest of you do it, we're going to come along. And they aren't signing a deal between states at all.
And the hope is they will once they get everyone that have passed that.
Basically, it's a pinky swear that we're going to do it if you do it.
Right.
And we're surprisingly close to it, actually.
Right.
Like when I first learned about this, I really didn't. I didn't think I'm going to look at this, and Ohio is the only state that's done it so far. And then I look at it, and it looks like 2-3 more states, and we're there. It was crazy. I thought it was nuts, but here we are getting close to that. So,
Right.
so then we're going to have the majority going with the popular vote. And then the next stage after that would be getting the ranked choice in for that majority.
For presidential, yeah.
And then what that actually does, I mean, when you really look at the math, the Electoral College is kind of just in the way.
That's right.
They don't serve a purpose at that point.
They're rendered obsolete.
Exactly. So whether they stay there and hold their wonderfully, old school positions that aren't needed anymore, these leftovers, these relics, is kind of up to whether, it's like having a royal family that doesn't have any power. It's like, well, yeah, sure, we'll keep you around, but
Right.
it doesn't mean anything.
Enjoy the caviar. Yeah.
And so, I mean, and the Electoral College itself is kind of a leftover from, I'm not one of the people who believes the Electoral College had no reason to exist in the first place. They make good argument for why it existed in the beginning. I mean, with 78% of the population when it was brought in, 78% of the population being illiterate, you needed a group of people who could talk to their base and say, here's what the people we're voting for actually mean, and break it down to terms that, and it wasn't that these people were dumb, it's just the society that they were in wasn't training them for these subjects. I needed a farmhand. I did not need someone who knew anything about, trade agreements.
Right.
And so, you needed that barrier. I get it. I get the argument. I believe the argument. It's not a gods and clods argument either. It's really just you had to have someone who could understand what the politicians were doing and then try and vote what he thought the people that he was representing wanted. And for a long time, that's what we had. At this point, with that number of who's illiterate and who understands what's going on being way different, it has swung to the point where we expect a majority of literacy and a majority of understanding of these subjects. I mean, maybe not a large majority of actually understanding, but the Electoral College has become kind of a relic of the past that doesn't really serve a need anymore. So,
also population is like vastly different from when it was originally put in place.
Of course, and even the population that is allowed to vote is, radically different.
Yeah.
But, so for me, the interstate compact is really important in that it kind of helps us get rid of this relic of the past. So, I mean, that's all interesting. The other thing that I really want to bring up that I think is key to these two pieces of the argument that I'd love to hear you speak to based on just your experience, kind of debating this stuff is, do you see ranked choice voting having an effect on campaign politics in that, the various forms of mudslinging and especially in relation to attack ads on third parties and things like that? Like, does ranked choice voting in any way affect that?
Absolutely. Voters are so sick and tired of the negative campaigning, the attack ads, the toxic rhetoric. With ranked choice voting, the way that campaigning is done is very different. Currently, candidates in our current system, they're trained to differentiate themselves, so it leads to just really playing fast and loose with dividing the electorate with our camp and their camp, and then peeling away a few swing voters where you just need enough numbers to win. So they engage in scorched earth strategies. With ranked choice voting, when you campaign, you have the ability to pick up second, third, and lower rankings from your opponent's base. That is a sea change in the tenor and tone of our campaigns, because you don't want to go negative on your opponent because their supporters will not give you their second and third choice votes. You will alienate them. So you will be punished if you go negative on your opponent. So you could be doing doors and you say, I know Mrs. Jones, I know you support my opponent, but we do have this, and this in common. I'd love to get your second choice vote. And so now you're focusing on finding common ground, finding consensus with a much broader base of voters.
That is something that I think is absolutely key to the future of elections in this country.
I feel like
we
that
need
should
that.
be the PR way to approach it.
Are you sick of negative ads?
Well, I mean,
we're going to run a negative ad on negative ads.
The reason we don't do that as our first talking point is because people are so beaten down and cynical, they literally don't believe us.
And I believe that.
Right.
They think
but it's just like,
it's too good to be true.
They voted for Trump. I mean, I don't know what they believe.
Like, but not even just Trump, but it's like, I mean, we've got so many populist candidates and just ads and we've got a whole network that just creates talking points. And it's just, I don't know. It's just
It's
like
an industry.
if someone was like, "Hey, can I be your third place?"
Right.
Like,
Please.
you know, please.
Right. We
like,
both love puppies.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
just vote on
I'm
puppies.
pro puppy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that would be.
Seventh.
Can we at
Can I
least
be your
get there?
eighth?
Yeah, like you don't really need to like me.
As long as I'm on there, just help
Give
me
me
out.
Yeah,
Help
just
me out.
give me a number.
That's right.
So, we've gone over the positives from this. The positives are, greater control of who actually gets into office for the populace. Their vote matters a lot more than it does in a two-party system. In a single vote system, you get to control really who you want in. And it doesn't have to be your first vote. It can be your second vote or your third vote that gets in. But if there's someone you really don't want in, he's your last vote. He's probably not going to make it in. That there's I don't know. There's a real positive here, I think, in helping those third-party candidates, or the kind of secondary ones that might claim to say be Democratic, but someone's the party candidate who they really want in. So you run into the Hillary-Bernie situation where there's the absolute party candidate. Who some people who are horrible will work against Debbie Wasserman Schultz, but
That also happened during the Obama years too, with Edwards and Obama.
It literally happens nonstop.
So
right.
yeah, it's not.
I mean, it wasn't just her. She's just the most recent example of a horrible human being who should have been voted out of office.
a long time ago.
What's something a lot of people don't realize is that you can advocate for ranked choice voting that within a party to say that it strengthens the party, and this is what we did at the Democratic Convention. The party leaders are really they're worried about this Bernie-Hillary split that still remains today, the residues of that, the fallout of that. So they're looking for ways, for tools and mechanisms to keep the Democratic Party unified. And ranked choice voting.
Well, I don't think "keep it unified" is the correct term here. It is not.
Yeah, you're
unified.
right. To try to bring it.
I know
back
a
together.
lot of people who are literally, if you had to ask them the party would be Bernie.
Yeah,
and
right.
it's not even independent. It's literally that's my party.
yeah,
That's
because
right.
Look at the Our Revolution people.
got,
Look
like,
at
you got like a Democratic Party that can't even decide what its platform is anymore.
like on a
That's
national
right.
level.
That's right. It's
Yeah.
being torn apart at the seams.
So
And,
it's
and
crazy.
it reflects in their primaries. So we have a governor's race coming up, and we have a Democratic primary coming up with some really good candidates. But voters now, if any of those candidates go negative on each other, let's say the winner of that primary comes out into the general, but they win with, say, 35% of the vote. And they've been slammed in the news media from the primary. They're a weaker candidate facing off the Republican in the general. With ranked choice voting, these voters will consolidate, rank a combination, and the winner will get a majority. They'll get more than 50%. So that sends a signal of unity and strength.
Now,
to the public.
one of the things that people like to talk about in politics, and something we actually brought up before we went on the air with Brexit and Theresa May, was this idea of a mandate. In the single vote plurality kind of system that we currently have, a mandate is clear. If someone really crushes somebody else, there's a mandate. And what that really means is just I've been told by the people to do what I told them I was going to do. And if anyone gets in my way, their seat might be in trouble. Like, they really wanted me to do this. With ranked choice voting, how does that affect the idea of this, kind of, it's not a real thing, but how does it affect that idea of a mandate?
Let me put it to you this way. My state representative, my U.S. congressman won his primary with 23% of the vote because it was a really crowded field. So that means that 77% of the voters did not want him. So that is a very weak
He has an anti-mandate.
mandate. That's right. So that is a plurality mandate. It's like the biggest faction wins rather than the most of voters, the majority of voters win their thing. So with ranked choice, you're assured a much healthier number of supporters in the end, more than 50%.
So let's say somehow by, sheer luck and accident during this wonderful episode today, we've convinced some people that they need to learn more. They need to take part. They need to help get this to actually be a thing in Massachusetts. And by all means, their own states too. How do they help get this moved forward? How do you get the ball down the road here?
Right. So I want to let folks know that I'm in constant communication with Fair Vote executive staff. Represent Us. Also, I want to give a shout out. They've put ranked choice voting on their platform, which is really exciting. They're keeping eyes on us because we are the most active ranked choice voting effort in the country right now.
Fair Vote is at fairvote.org and Represent Us is at represent.us.
That's correct, yes. So check those guys out. We have grown from a tiny mailing list of 230 people back in November to a mailing list of 5,300 people today. We have over 1,200 people signed up to volunteer. We've raised over $35,000. We're an all-volunteer organization. And so our next moves will be to professionalize. And that
Are you an actual political nonprofit in the state?
We're a 501c3 and a 501c4. So we have an educational component and a political action component. And so what we need to do next is level up, and that is raise more money to hire our first staff. If we could get 25-fold increase in growth in 7 months just with volunteers, imagine what we could do with a full-time executive director, with interns, making the calls we need to keep people activated and engaged.
Statisticians, phone banking, everything.
Russian hackers, the news. Everyone you need to win a campaign.
Right. So for people, we'd love people to get involved by visiting our website, voterchoicema.org/join. So link up with us, sign our mailing list. I send emails about once every 1 to 2 weeks.
I'm on the list. He is honest there. I do not get spammed, and they're usually great information with actionable calls in it. Again, that's voterchoicema.org. And we're going to link to that on our social media, on our website, everywhere at the end of this. So it should be pretty easy for you to find. Besides joining your mailing list, I mean, on the mailing list, you give people things to do, like, call now, but what is the next step for this type of legislation in this state?
So we actually, this is the other beauty of what we've done is we haven't given people a clear end game yet. We're actually talking about the vision and promise of this policy. And we are getting people on board to volunteer with us on that. And that's how
hopes and dreams.
Yes. Can you imagine? That's
now, I feel like that might be a little dangerous.
No. Well, we of course have potential end games in mind, and I'll give you some examples. So we do have the 2 bills in the State House. Okay. We have this bill that allows cities and towns to adopt ranked choice voting with a simple vote of the people or of their city council. That's one. We have the bill that enacts it statewide, kind of like Maine. Passing a bill in our legislature of this magnitude is very difficult. As you know, lawmakers don't go for this. So the potential other avenue is the ballot. Just like Maine, put a question on the 2018 ballot and then have people vote on it.
Just like the ones most people remember, I believe will be question 2 and question 4 from the last about decade.
That's right.
Here in Massachusetts.
That's right. Now to do that requires serious funding. Even getting the signature gatherers, you need good management because gathering signatures is hard. You need a hell of a lot of them. You only have 3 to 4 months to do it. And so that would start at the end of August if we were to go that route. And you need about $100,000 to $200,000 in funding to really make that successful. Once it's on the ballot, if you don't have opposition, you could spend maybe $500,000 to $1 million to do enough of the messaging and education around the state to get folks to vote yes on it. But if there is opposition, you could be spending $3 to $5 or more $1 million, kind of in a cold war of ads. Now,
and that actually sounds best case scenario right now that you would have to go to the ballot.
Probably. That's probably how this will be won in the end. Now, we took our $30-some thousand and we're spending most of that on a statewide poll to get good, actionable intelligence about how voters understand the issue, what arguments really work to help them understand the benefits and get. You
brought in-house people in, or have you hired one of the firms here? I think they're all in Cambridge.
We've hired a local pollster who knows his stuff.
Good.
And he's won a lot of campaigns for candidates and some local ballot measures, so he knows what he's doing. We're really looking forward to getting some good actionable data out of that and some message strategy.
Good to hear it. So what it sounds like to me, one is we need to go the ballot route. I don't think in this climate we get our legislature here in this state to go for it, because there are enough of them that this, gets scary for their reelection. So getting it to the ballot, that's going to require money. That's going to require donations. So that's the first big ask. Get the donations to come in. Get the money flowing. If you've got some, share. But honestly, if you know big political donors, share that too. You know, get them to understand this cause. Get them to listen to this. Get them to visit the website.
To write a check.
Seriously. I think that it's weird because a lot of times in politics, I like looking for the solution that isn't money. You know, I mentioned Mike Connolly earlier, and you know when he first ran for city councilor, when he was first trying to do this occupier who we all love ran as No Money Mike, and I loved it. I loved the sales pitch that, you know, let's get as much of the money out of politics as we possibly can. I mean, something that Bernie wanted to run on campaign reform, and
a terrible horse racing name.
It really would. It really would. Although I will say that, you know, Horsey McHorseface won his race this weekend, and that was awesome. But, you know, so in this instance, it does sound like the only way this gets through is a fair amount of money getting put into it.
Unfortunately, yes.
You can also start calling state representatives, like not like or your
That's
local reps, because it's like if people are calling with being interested in something and want it. Well, they're going to be forced to listen to the constituents because
they'll be forced to listen, but they still don't have to act on it.
Democrats hold 80% of the state legislature. So it's like if a bunch of constituents for Democratic candidates or like state members are wanting ranked choice, then what's the excuse not to pass it?
That's right. I mean, people can make up all sorts of excuses, just like with the marijuana legalization question.
So that's my next question. So, you know, marijuana legalization passed here as a ballot measure, the same type of ballot measure we're talking about here. And they are doing everything they can to make it more complex, harder to actually implement. So right now, the fight is that they've got a commission together that is supposed to be finding out the ways at which it will be legal to sell. So right now it's actually legal to consume in certain quantities. It's legal to actually own in certain quantities, and it's even legal to grow in certain quantities, but it is not legal to sell. So they're putting that off. They're putting that off, and they've decided that it's going to be next session. And you know, it's going to be 2-3 years since the ballot measure before it even might be legal to sell. Do you see that same? Do you have that fear about this if we do the ballot measure? Is that what we're looking forward to?
You always have that risk. You always have that risk. It really depends on the political attitudes of the electeds at the time. And this is what they did with clean elections.
And so that specifically says that Kayla might be right over here, that, you know, if we get the money together.
Can you say that again one more time and louder and slower?
That if we
and into
get
the microphone so I can
the money
hear.
Right, that you know,
no, back
that
it up.
you still
Kayla,
you
she
still
likes monosyllabic words.
Yes, Kayla might be right on this one.
Yeah,
that, you know,
that's what I wanted to hear.
The specific need here will not only be the donations, but you know, once the ballot measure happens, everyone's going to really need to reach out to their legislators, really let them know, and don't just call. You know, you can show up at their offices. You might not talk to them, but you're going to talk to people that are getting sick and tired of hearing this, and they're going to go and tell them that everyone who walks in the door says this.
That's right. They work for you.
Yeah, and you know, make them understand that they work for you. I think there's a few decent legislators in this state that would absolutely go for it, no question. But I have a feeling that there's a majority of them that would slow this one down, that would find ways to make new commissions necessary, that would find ways to, it's going to take us 2 years to come up with how you actually implement the ballot. You know, do you have to write all the names, or you know, are we giving them a computer thing where they're drag and dropping? Like they're gonna argue for like years, right? Yeah. So that's gonna take people actually getting on the phone and showing up in person. Showing up to open session, showing up to any town halls, you know, really making it clear we want this. And I think if you want to be a part of all of that, get on the mailing list, right?
That's right. We have actions going on all the time. We have, as I mentioned in the beginning, we have a legislative briefing, so which I'll be presenting to actual state reps and state senators. So if you want to meet some and understand how the sausage is made and how we're plugging into the system to push something through, you could come and join us for that.
So we're about an hour in here. I think we've got some pretty good action items, some pretty good education out of this whole talk with Adam here, and I think it's time to force Adam to talk about other political issues. and keep him around.
Okay, I'll do my best.
Out of your comfort zone.
Right.
So,
Have you heard of politics before?
Pomernix?
Not yet. Yeah, Pomernix.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is this
I'm a populist.
Yeah, there you go. So I would like to open up with, point of discussion. Our businessman in chief, who thinks he knows business, who is currently playing president and doing it badly, has said that he would bring manufacturing to the country. He would bring jobs. Everything would be going amazing. And for the second time in 3 months, manufacturing is down. So this supposed businessman who was going to bring us manufacturing jobs is actually costing us manufacturing jobs. We are losing manufacturing jobs. Shocker. What do we feel about this one, team?
I mean, on the one hand, I'm a little hesitant to put too much blame for this on Trump specifically, simply because he hasn't really done all that much in terms of things that have any actual legal effect. So I can't really say that, he signed this legislation into law and that is harming manufacturing, because he hasn't done any of that.
What you can say is that, it's public opinion. It's demand is made by public opinion, and demand speaks to output. So
absolutely,
how much demand there is speaks to how much manufacturing has to be happening, and he is affecting demand in one way or another.
Absolutely, he certainly does. He certainly does bear some measure of responsibility, and it's important to remember, of course, that many of the deals are going to be international in nature, and the perception of the U.S. and what the future business environment and things like that can have a
So are you attempting to argue that, this is sort of like Trump taking credit for all the jobs increase in the first month he was in office when those really kind of belonged to someone else?
Yeah, I don't want to put too much responsibility on
positive or negative credit. Really, he's done nothing, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, yes.
That's in short.
Our failure in
chief.
He has
tweeted so much, though.
His tweet game is pretty
hot.
And
he keeps
I gotta tell you.
tweeting jobs. Just the word jobs. So
just the word jobs.
I think that's how he thinks jobs are made.
So I mean, failure in chief. I gotta say, he's doing a great job creating jobs in the specific sector he said he would.
What, Russian hackers?
There you go. That's the move. I was reaching for that
China?
one, and we finally got someone to go there. It's really interesting, just every day, because we try to really boil it down to just a few topics of what we can talk about today. That's the most important news of the day, and because of Trump and the world he's created, this one I will give him some credit for. There is groundbreaking news on a daily basis, sometimes, 2 or 3 times a day, that I was growing up more used to seeing once every few months. And it makes it really hard to choose what we're going to talk about on the show. So,
I wish we could have a ranked choice in our options of topics we could talk about.
Well, now that she brings it up, I will be announcing that a feature coming to the website probably in about a month and a half will be the ability for users to actually submit topics that they want talked about, and for other, listeners to be able to go on there and up or down vote them. So
that's
we
gonna
won't
leave us with like Bodie McBoatface.
Well, again, just like Bodie McBoatface, we will not be promising that the top 3 will be the ones that we actually talk about, but we will do our very best as long as
like our Paris Agreement for topics.
Yeah, as long as we can talk about that subject without, say, going to jail, that we will at least attempt to talk about it. So that'll be happening relatively soon. But on to more Trump, because we can't get away from him. I don't want the podcast to only be Trump, but it's really hard.
It does make it really, like, we've talked about all these topics that aren't current events that we want to cover, and it's really hard to get to them simply because there's so much in the way of current events to talk about.
So the Washington Post reports that 3 senior intelligence officers are being interviewed by Bob Mueller as he looks into whether Trump obstructed justice in the Russia case. They're going to be talking to the Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coates, the National Security Agency Director, Mike Rogers, former NSA Deputy Director, Richard Leggett, and what they want is, an expanding kind of nature into the probe on the Russian hack, and specifically this set of questioning is about the obstruction of justice, which Trump, quickly took to Twitter to say they made up a phony collusion with the Russian story, found zero proof, so now they go for obstruction of justice on a phony story. Nice. The fact that our president talks in a way where nice is how he ends sentences and statements, and and he thinks that's the right meaning and the right posture for a president to be talking to the public. Like, I don't get it. I don't understand how we live in a world where that's.
He also says sad a lot.
Yeah.
Calls people losers. I mean, I just think it's so funny that he's so upset about like him potentially being a criminal for obstruction of justice. Just wait until someone explains to him how there's like over 2 million people in jail for a lot lesser offenses. Maybe he'll get so outraged over that. No, probably not.
No, because there's Donald Trump.
Yeah, and the majority of them aren't rich white guys.
True.
And he has that going for him.
He probably hasn't even met basically any of them.
Well, and he's also, only a rich white guy because, even though he fails at business repeatedly and often, and it's the only actual thing he's good at is failing, the bankruptcy laws keep kind of, giving him a soft cushion. 8 of them now, I think is the number.
4.
No,
Well, I mean, he's at, I think,
4.
4, like, I think 8 failed businesses.
Yeah, 8 failed major businesses,
Including
4 of them bankrupt.
Including an airplane industry. He tried to come up with his own airplane line, industry, failed within 2 years, and now he wants to overhaul the entire air traffic controllers.
He also managed to be basically the only person in history to lose money on a casino without being, a patron rather than the owner.
Yeah. So Trump. That is just wonderful.
And there's a lot of interesting details that have come out this week regarding Mueller's investigation and team. For example, we heard from the New York Times that a former senior official said that the investigation is not only looking at the Russian connections directly and, of course, now obstruction of justice, but is also looking at the possibility of money laundering by Trump associates. And that makes some of the team that Robert Mueller has brought in very interesting picks. For example, Andrew Weissman is a former Department of Justice fraud investigator who oversaw the Enron task force. And we also had Lisa Page, who is a Department of Justice trial attorney, has extensive experience with money laundering and organized crime cases, and previously worked alongside the FBI task force in Budapest that specializes in organized crime in Eastern Europe. So some of these hires make a lot of sense and are very interesting in the light of some of these events.
Yeah, so just
by
by
a Deutsche Bank account, or did he do anything with Deutsche Bank?
Yes,
because Deutsche Bank just went down for money laundering, so it's all kind of inevitable that.
Well, I mean, Trump is the most mentioned American in the Panama Papers.
Oh, I didn't go through all of those.
Yeah, it's surprisingly a large.
And then we have
number
Delaware.
Of mentions.
What is he even doing?
Well, how crazy is it that he's so bad that he actually is in the Panama Papers? Because we have Delaware and Nevada. I mean, it's unbelievably
you don't
easy
even have
to
to
get
go
away
out
with
of the
anything.
country to be a shell
In Nevada,
enterprise.
you can have a shell that owns a shell that owns a shell that owns a shell that someone else made, and the third one is already out of business, but somehow the money still flows.
And our financial
you don't need Panama for this.
Our financial regulations and disclosure rules already in the United States in general have a lot of exemptions and loopholes that people can take advantage of that mean they don't need to go to Panama.
Except for Trump.
Except
Right.
for Trump, because
he loves to fail.
He does. And then one of the funnier things that happened in the last few days is, while America, we were passing sanctions against Iran and Russia over a lot of what's happened lately. Russia, Putin specifically, joked that he was offering asylum to Comey if he needed it. If Comey actually comes to a point where it looks like he might get charged with something, then he's got an asylum offer from
I
Putin.
don't rule that out as a possibility at this point. That it would have that would happen.
Revenge charges?
I feel like if Comey got charged with anything, he'd be like, you know what, bring it. I was the director of the FBI. I know this topic well enough.
Yeah.
Then my ass is covered.
I mean,
it would be a great Law and
it's
Order
the strangest thing finding myself wanting the former head of the FBI to win a battle. Like I
that's a
have
very
never
strange
found myself
feeling.
on the side of them.
He does seem likable lately, doesn't he?
A little more likable now that he's not actually in official capacity. He's been this guy who I think I could relate to a little.
He even swears in public. Lordy.
I know. Oh my God. You know, one of the more interesting things from Trump's, you know, we just mentioned Iran, but from Trump's kind of visit over there to Saudi Arabia and the Arab nations, as they were talking about things like the Arab NATO and the Sunni NATO, as it was referred to. While there, he worked to convince them that Qatar was evil, and they kind of agreed, mostly, I think, because they hate Al Jazeera. And so all of a sudden, you know, it gets blocked off on some of its ports. It gets its land connections with its borders with Saudi Arabia blocked. It gets, you know, all this stuff starts happening to it. And at that same time, Trump is talking about and talking up the $100+ billion arms deal that he made with the Saudi Arabian government. And turns out he didn't. No deal was made or signed, and that any deal that was even talked about was already being talked about under Obama. So there's no deal there, and it didn't happen. Maybe in the future they might still buy something. We don't know. That's the best we got. While Trump is working to get everyone surrounding Qatar to sanction it and to do everything they can to cut it off from the rest of the world, the Pentagon actually makes a deal with a country over there, Qatar, to sell $12 billion worth of F-15s and all the repair equipment and everything else to Qatar. So this country that our president is currently saying funds all the terrorists, the Pentagon is selling F-15s
Does that
too.
need Congress approval at all, or can Pentagon just do a deal like that?
I believe they can unless Congress intervenes.
Yeah,
Congress can actually block sales and write a law stating that no weapons are going to be sold to this country or restricting it.
correct.
But
So
I
they can
don't-
cut the deal off after it's already been signed, and then we have to back out. So if you look at all the contracts that they make for this, there are sections where they literally say, "We've signed, you've signed, great, done deal, contract law." But just in case, if our Congress happens to come back and retroactively say no, we're out. They all have clauses
makes
built into
sense.
them that allow for that. But as of now, you know, this supposed country that our president thinks is supporting all the terrorists, when in reality we know who's doing that: Iran, Saudi Arabia. We're selling them $12 billion worth of jets.
Didn't we have a statement from someone at the State Department just this week about Qatar not being a sponsor of terrorism too?
Yeah, I think
think there
did
was-
Tillerson or something.
Yeah, I believe that's right.
Yeah. So
Didn't
that's
the
just
Senate,
crazy.
like, vote in opposition to that Saudi deal? There was definitely an AP notification that there was like some Senate like major opposition to
Yeah,
the
they
Saudi.
don't want the deal at all.
So it's like not only did Trump not make the Saudi deal, Senate doesn't want it, and the Pentagon is now making deals with Qatar.
According to every Trump voter everywhere, that's fake news.
Oh yeah, facts, facts. We got to go with the alternative facts. Trump is great,
Yes,
The
that
best. Tremendous.
huge. Him and those small hands.
tiny,
You know, every
tiny
time I
hand.
like drop something like by the seat in my car, and it's like in between, you know, and I can't get my hand down there, I think of Trump's hands and wishing that my hands were as small as his to get at
so you can
the
get
thing.
like those little crevices.
Yeah.
I mean, they're small, but they're like little sausages. I don't feel like it would help all that much.
They're like
They-
chubby baby hands.
They're not really, they're just shorter. It's not like they're actually like small.
So, in other news this week, of course, Jeff Sessions had a session,
Oh God, what a
and it
racist little
was
Keebler.
the worst thing ever. Literally, like, you don't want to use words like dwarf and whatnot, but just because, you know, but like at the same time, he looks like Dopey from Snow White. He really does. Specifically, the Disney version of it.
Yeah, with this like his doe eyes.
Yeah.
And just like
It's-
constantly be like, I don't know where I am.
I know.
I just thought we won the war, and all of a sudden all these colors are around, and they're voting. Oh, that's to declare. And he's like, I'm getting the vapors. That's just like
You
all
may
I.
have mixed in a little Lindsey Graham there.
Oh no, he's a little Southern Belle.
Yeah.
That was a good mix anyway, I think, of all three. Besides, Paul Ryan has to be looking around right now going, I fucking told you guys what was going to happen. All of you, that this was going to be the best option that you guys had. Saw it coming ahead of time, and still, it's who they wanted though. So he still has to kind of eat that crow. He still has to kind of just stand up there and take it, I guess, right? I mean,
but
Paul Ryan has been taking it up.
He fought for
yeah.
a long time.
You don't have to finish that one.
Well, you can. I mean,
so one of the more interesting things from this one is, unlike other times where he said, I didn't meet with any Russians specifically pertaining to the campaign, or I didn't meet with any Russians specific to interference, which he repeated those at this. He specifically denied meeting Russian officials at the Mayflower Hotel in April 2016.
He denied recalling a meeting.
And then
Correct.
later in the session, talked about his meeting at the Mayflower.
Right. And so, I actually believe that he's forgetting these things now. Not all of them. I think he damn well knows that he met with them and that he talked about things he shouldn't have. And I mean, we know that he has invited them out to dinners and things like that.
Some American lobbyist came out today.
Richard Burt.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he was like, he was hosting 2 specific events.
Now, Richard Burt, who is an American, actually lobbies on behalf of Russian interests.
Registered as a foreign agent,
exactly. The
before
correct
he
way.
started doing
the correct way. And yeah, he said that he attended 2 dinners hosted by Sessions in the summer of 2016 and was in fact asked to provide a draft for Trump's speech in April at the Mayflower Hotel, and that parts of his draft made it into the final version of the speech.
One thing's for sure, I need to visit this Mayflower Hotel now. I just want to know what it's about. I want to see what's inside because it seems to be the big
I don't
place
think
to
you
be.
can afford it.
Yeah.
Oh, I wouldn't be able to. I would definitely be one of the shenanigans, like the riffraff that they would try to kick out. But I definitely want to see what's inside.
We basically didn't learn anything as Sessions got questioned because he, kind of through the transitive property, I guess, decided to use the president's executive privilege, even though
just in case
he doesn't have it.
Right.
He was protecting the president's right to it, which isn't really a thing.
No.
And he had no right to do what he did there. So whether or not the committee decides to come at him legally to get answers to these or not, we still don't know.
That just came out. I was listening to it. So what he testified in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee, which has no legal holding or oversight over him whatsoever.
Right.
What the 2 committees that do have any type of judicial oversight over him, he has repeatedly canceled and refused to
Justice Oversight Committee.
Yeah, and the House Oversight Committee, the Judicial Committee. So it's like and they asked him in that committee, will you now testify in front of the House Oversight Committee or the Judicial Committee? And he was like, I don't want to keep repeating myself because I just keep perjuring myself when I do it.
Those are basically the words I heard too. I mean, I paraphrased, but that's what I heard.
2 things did come out of the testimony, or the hearing that was absolutely splendid. It was Angus King doing something I liked.
Oh yeah.
And it was Kamala Harris being a boss.
Yes, we have, however, heard from her multiple times since that she is not running for president.
Well, I don't want her to because I think she's a boss in her seat right now, and
it's
she
the
would
same reason people give for Elizabeth Warren not running.
No,
either.
and I like that. I like strong members in the Senate because you need strong voices because you need those votes. And I think
the people aren't going to vote for Hillary, and if you want,
she's not running again.
Right, but
we don't have to think about that.
But
I mean,
every other woman that gets up to a seat of power at that level, everyone tells me, well, I don't want them to run for president because they've got a position that we need to hold.
I'm just saying that I like them in their seat. If they decided to run, all in on them.
Okay.
I would be the first person to sign up for Kamala Harris's campaign.
That just seems like an interesting kind of fake ceiling, like glass ceiling there.
No, it's not fake
and
because you see strong people in the positions at a strong seat, and it's like we haven't had women like that in these positions. Right. So it's like until there's 100 women in the Senate, which would be an instant orgasm for me.
As we're talking about women in positions, yes. Just keep going down that path.
Typical man.
Oh yeah, I'm the one making the jokes.
I'm just saying, like when you see because
Right, but what you're saying is
we don't need to kick women out when they're doing their job and they're doing their job.
Not kicking them
great.
out, but what you're saying,
what I'm
look
saying
at Ted
is they're
Cruz,
doing an amazing job, and I want to keep
Ted
them.
Cruz. Look at all the other
Ted Cruz
people.
is a fucking Zodiac killer.
Right, but notice he tried to run and still has his seat. They don't have to give up their seat to run. They have to give up their seat if they won. So,
but that's only if they can balance it. Like, who knows what they're doing on the sidelines?
I have no idea if he was balancing it at all. I highly doubt it.
I'm sure he wasn't. I mean, surely just is stocking up his cans of soup like a crazy Zodiac killer.
Right.
Well, I mean, he could have chosen the example of Marco Rubio instead, who we know wasn't doing his job as a senator because he didn't show up and told us he wasn't doing his job.
And he also said that he wasn't going to run for re-election. Then when he did so dismal in the primaries, he was like, "Just kidding. Well, I'm gonna keep my job."
I was really surprised at every one of these committees in the last few months that Rubio was allowed to be at. He was there. Every time there was someone actually standing behind his nameplate and then sitting down, I was like, wait, it's Rubio showed up. What's going on?
Well, yeah,
very strange.
Because he has to actually do a job now. Or else
apparently not, because he spent a while not doing it and then got reelected anyway.
Ugh.
So, Sessions is a funny little man.
And we still don't know where his factory is in the woods.
We still do
we
not.
do, however, that
you
meeting,
can buy his cookies at the store, though, right?
I want to steal that factory.
That meeting he doesn't recall. We know that it happened because Getty Images published a photo of Kislyak and Sessions at the Mayflower Hotel on April 27th, and even had both of their names in the caption.
Getty Images is good for something. They're good for something.
You know,
least, right?
it's one of the first times in my life that I've been happy that Getty Images exist.
Right?
They have
Horrible.
60 images of me, and I've asked before I need to use one of these, even if I crop pieces of it. And they're like, $800 for you to have it on your website for a month. Like, what are you talking about?
My own
That's
face.
me.
Or 800,000.
Like, yeah, but you didn't take the
picture.
picture. I'm like, well, I guess. And then all my photographer friends yell at me for not understanding how that works and why they're all losing their jobs. And I'm sure I'm wrong here. It still annoys me, though. So we have talked about all kinds of fun subjects. The one thing that we haven't talked about yet is a little more serious. You know, we had a shooting yesterday morning.
Which one?
Oh, are you playing that game with me? I say serious, she jokes. I love it.
Well, it's
That's why-
America.
that's why
There's a
you're
shooting
here.
every other day and every other hour. So it's
Well,
at this point.
the one that the white person did.
Oh, the
Oh
one.
wait, that's like every one of them too, right? Like
That's every
Not
mass shooting.
narrowing it down.
yeah, that's all our mass shootings. So this was in Virginia, and a gunman by the name of James T. Hodgkinson, not to be mixed up with James T. Kirk.
Or Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Yes, he came at a baseball field with some Republicans on it, and on his way to the field, he specifically asked people in the parking lot who was on the field.
Well, so there's actually some discrepancy. We don't know.
The people who were actually asked came out today and actually gave exact statements.
Well, they gave statements, but we can't confirm. We can definitely
We have firsthand statements, and it's whether you believe the person who says that's what he asked or not.
Oh, but at the same time, he's dead. The gunman's dead, so we can't confirm or deny it. You know what I mean? So it's one of the things. So it's it's highly probable that it was him, but at the same time, we can't just sit there and say it was definitely him. Allegedly is the best way to say it.
For whether he actually shot them or whether he asked the question.
Whether he was the same person that one of the two, congressmen in the car asked who was practicing, and if he was right before it got shot up.
What we do have is them seeing his photo afterward and saying, "Yep."
And then, but they also
the same
said
way we do lots of legal things in this
I
wonderful
know, but
country
at the
with
same
lineups
time,
and photos and.
I think we may have recalled, we may have previously discussed that eyewitness testimony is actually very unreliable.
It's more unreliable as time passes. And, this was within about 20 hours.
No, I'm inclined to agree.
So
it's just worth keeping
I'm going to believe this
there's-
one, even though, yes, correct, alleged, blah, blah, blah. So we also have lots of other witnesses, including people who go to the YMCA across from this field, claiming that they saw him there regularly for weeks. One couple who was actually outside when the shooting happened, and The man ran one way, the woman ran the other way, and then they came back together for an interview later on, said that they go to that YMCA every morning and that he was sitting basically in the foyer in the front area with his laptop out like every morning for a few weeks, and he was nice and said hi, and and they had no idea what he was doing, but they were just used to kind of randos hanging out at the YMCA, like that's a thing. So they weren't bothered by this, it didn't look weird to them. But, he went out there with a specific goal that is relatively obvious. I mean, to shoot Republicans. He staked it out. He knew when they were there, allegedly asked people in the parking lot if, who was there, and was told Republicans, and went to open fire. I want to state for the record that even though I am very anti-GOP and RNC, shooting them is not the answer.
No, shooting anything is usually not the answer.
Yeah. No,
I mean, targets, bullseyes. I mean, those
never
are
people, never people,
never
Right.
people, and never quite a lot of animals.
But I mean,
unless
we
subsistence,
can't,
all that.
But at the same time, we also can't ignore the irony of the entire situation, because the House had a scheduled debate for a bill that would have repealed the prohibition and the regulations on gun silencers at 10 a.m. that day.
Yep.
Scalise, who was shot and is still in critical condition, hopefully he survives, just because I think he's an abysmal, abhorrent person, but he doesn't deserve to get shot. He deserves to lose his seat. But it's like he has got this giant record of like just making it easier to have guns. Everyone, pretty much.
He does whatever the lobbyists tell him to.
Yeah, and pretty much most Republicans, if they, to stay in their seat, they just kept rolling back gun legislations, making it easier, trying to take away health care. And it's like, what do the Republicans think was going to happen? It's like no one can get mental health coverage, but you can buy as many guns as you want. And you're trying to take away Medicare, for seniors. You're trying to take away Social Security now. It's like we've got a giant wage gap, and it's like people are losing their jobs. Like the whole reason Trump won is because he supposedly talked to the the coal miners that were losing their jobs. And it's like there's so much hatred, and there's so many emotions, and it's like, what did they think was ever going to happen?
Yeah, I agree that it was kind of maybe not this specific thing, but in a general sense, it's kind of predictable. I mean, we saw with Obama the very idea that supposedly the Democrats were going to institute death panels or a million other conspiracies that were supposedly going to kill all these people.
Registries.
Whatever. It was going to kill people and blah, blah, blah. And we had people threatening congressmen. We had at least one congressman actually shot over these things. It's very predictable that when people feel like they are actually threatened, that some of the more desperate people will turn to violence. It's not really an unforeseeable thing. And having a group of people, pushing a bunch of policies that are actually going to hurt people, I think we can reasonably expect that at some point, someone is going to think this is a good idea.
Yeah, and one of the bigger issues we have now is that the right really has, for lack of a better term, a way better propaganda machine.
Oh yeah, they have an entire station.
More than one.
Yeah. OAN, Fox, just tons of them, and Breitbart, and just
Alex Jones, Drudge Report,
everything. They have such a louder microphone than the Democrats, and they've honed it to a point where they really, again, I mean, they control that audience. They control what they believe, what they think, and they're politicizing this in ways where they're saying that the left is about violence, that the left is now threatening, that this is an actual left issue. It wasn't an individual's issue. It's literally a problem of the whole left.
Yeah, they're saying because we we can't agree with the right that we want to hurt them. It's
the hashtag culture
of violence. We want them to lose their job. That's it.
Just to be clear here, Steve Scalise, the representative from Louisiana who once allegedly self-described as like David Duke without the baggage, is an awful representative. He's a bad
an awful
person,
human being.
But no one here is in any way, shape, or form advocating or supporting any actual harm to him. And I think most of us are at least, nominally on the left, and some of us here I know are pretty far left.
I think, one of the solutions to this type of problem, because, we talk about this problem as him needing to lose his seat and others needing to lose their seats in order to affect change to the types of legislation they're passing, the power the lobbyists have over our legislators. And you know what helps us replace all of these people who are just listening to the lobbyists? Ranked choice voting, national popular vote. We had a long conversation
circle,
about this
baby.
stuff. Full circle. And I think, again, looking at these issues, you can actually bring this shooting back to talking about that, who knows what actually set this person off, although you can, read things on his Facebook and, or you could have, there are screenshots of most of
history
it.
of violence. He had a history of arrests. Like, he was a violent person for quite some time.
But I don't think this is the last time this happens, due to the fact that the right is really working hard to basically support their lobbyists and do what they're told. And that means they support industries and positions that do nothing but harm the people who might actually get that violent. And what's interesting is that he actually attacked them. Their rhetoric has been so strongly blaming the left for all the things that the right is actually doing, that it surprises me that someone in the mental state that would actually do this shooting at least shot the side that's, responsible for the problem.
How many times we've heard someone from a member of Congress, like a Republican Congress, Fox News, all those talking heads be like, we had the Second Amendment to protect us from tyranny. And it's like, well, maybe stop giving them orders.
Just to note, Rand Paul, who was one of the people at the field and had to take cover from the gunfire, has a tweet from last year talking about exactly that. The Second Amendment is about defending yourself from the government when it becomes tyrannical.
One man's tyranny is another man's GOP, It's all about perspective.
And again, we can joke all we want. Don't shoot people.
Yeah,
Use
not.
the ballot box. Vote these people out of office. Learn. Follow the truth. Follow Open Secrets. Follow all these other websites that track what the government is doing, what your representatives are doing. You can find every last bit of this information, what their records are on all of this. There's a website, the number 4, the letters us.com, 4us.com. If you go there and put in where you live, put in your area code, it'll show you who represents you, their entire voting record. It'll show you the upcoming bills that they have a chance to vote on, where they are likely to vote based on already existing public statements or whether they're already sponsoring the bill. It gives you all this information, and it gives you the ability to comment directly to them from this site. It gives you their contact information and gives you short snippets of what the bills are about and summaries on every single bill going before local and federal elections. Go to these websites, get this knowledge, and go to your representatives. And if you don't like their responses, vote them out. Don't shoot them.
What's that famous saying? Ballot box, soap box, jury box, bullet, ammo box. Use in that order.
Yes.
But not necessarily use it literally.
Well, yeah.
It's
No,
more like metaphorically.
Well, I mean,
it's a joke.
It's when elections have failed, you rely on law enforcement, and then only when everything else that can possibly be used has failed.
Yeah, when you end up in North Korea, but you happen to have a gun.
Exactly. That's the time when you start thinking, maybe
use the gun.
Right.
Again, also not advocating for assassination of any world leaders.
Just to note, we are not telling you to go out and shoot Kim Jong-un.
I mean, we're not telling you that. We're just not talking about it in either direction.
Yes.
They're going to take down their entire website like they did with the interview movie now.
Right. So, it was a tragic event, and, surprisingly, they still actually are holding the baseball game tonight. So it's probably going as we record this. No idea what the score is, and don't really care, actually.
I don't really care about...
Did anyone in America actually even know this game happened except for the shooter?
Or them, the Congress people. But also at the same time, I don't like thinking about, half of these people as, actual people. Because it's like I don't want to know.
You've seen all the pictures of like Paul Ryan, like, topless, and like
and that's why
workout
she
gear.
doesn't want to think about them as people.
I know.
You
and
should
it's
see
like,
the face she's making
but
right
also
now.
like I don't want to think about like like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and like Scalia being friends because I know they were, but at the same time it's like ugh, like stop it.
Yeah, that one's kind of gross.
So again, we'll end that one with please don't shoot them, vote them out. Please, I beg of you. There's so many other topics to get to. We are pretty far into this one, but I do want to call out Theresa May on a wonderful job of failing at everything. Literally everything. She has a majority. She's going into the Brexit negotiations, and in order to have a stronger mandate, something we talked about earlier, she decides to actually call for another election 3 years early. Now, in England, they have the right to do this as the leader of the current government in power. They can call these elections whenever they feel like. And she called it 3 years early, thinking that it would give her a larger majority. And instead, it took her majority away. And the funniest reaction to her losing that majority, beyond her entire party begging her to leave, and other people threatening that if they made a deal with, the Northern Irish, Democrats and everyone, that they would, leave them and not vote for them again next time. All these other things. The funniest thing to me was Angela Merkel's response of, wanting the negotiations to happen the very next day. Can we get her while she's down? I mean, Angela Merkel's response to this was very much kick them while they're down. And the elections are happening right now. I mean, not the elections, the discussions, the negotiations are ongoing, as we speak. And it's hilarious.
It really is.
I mean, when you talk about political failures, calling an election because it's going to give you a stronger majority and then losing the majority you already had. I mean, how many other failures of that level have we seen at that height? I don't know of
Pretty
many.
unusual.
What, calling elections specifically, or?
Well, I mean, just
Because
someone
the
who's
2016 was
leading
a
a
pretty
nation.
colossal failure.
Well, that was a failure of the voters, not Trump and Hillary didn't get to choose that it was time to vote.
But at the same time, what I thought was interesting too, and it just plays to Theresa May's just I guess out of just disconnected, was basically when after the first London attack, and Trump attacked the London mayor, her numbers boom, because she had a 20-point lead,
Yeah.
a couple of weeks beforehand, and then Trump opened his stupid orange mouth like he always does, and then boom, her numbers just went right down the toilet, and it's at that point she should have known that she was in trouble.
Well, I mean, maybe don't invite Trump over for official state visits.
Well, she supported him at the beginning.
I
She
know.
was a big supporter of him, and then all of a sudden she was like, "Oh, he still keeps talking. He doesn't stop. Oh, this is bad, real bad."
So I think we have gone on long enough about all these fun subjects. I think that one's more just funny, and I love talking about it. But there's still 100 other things we could talk about.
But it's going to change in the next hour.
Yeah, from just everything going on in this world. So I think we're going to have to call it quits for the night. I think
so, because I also have to pee.
Well, I actually
I
did
do
that
need
during
to
the
go
show,
home
and
and
we can make it a
snuggle
game. Pick out which minute I actually did that. I dare you. I ran pretty fast, but I will say to the audience listening now that I hope they go and they visit voterchoicema.org and sign up for the mailing list. If you're in Massachusetts, if you're not, look up what they're doing and see if there's a group in your state. Fair Vote might even be already working in your state. Go talk to them. If they're not, look at what Voter Choice MA is doing and maybe ask if you can use some of their content. Set up your own state. I don't think they'd mind. What do you have to say about that, Adam?
We encourage it. We give you legal documents. I can show you how to set up a 501c3 in 20 minutes.
Look at that. All right, everyone out there, if you don't have a Voter Choice MA organization running for ranked choice, instant runoff voting, national popular vote, any of those types of subjects in your state right now, there you go. The help is on offer. It's on you if you don't do it now. So tonight, at the end of this episode, you are going to be the first ones to hear about all our wonderful social media and websites and Patreon and everything else. And I just want to, before we get into that wonderful little bump that's going to play after the show is over, I want to make this call, and it always feels weird to me, but this show, this studio, having these guests on, all this equipment, my co-hosts, I wish it was all free. It's not. There are some costs involved. Everything from electricity to microphones. So anyone out there who wants to help beyond donating to the more important causes like Voter Choice MA, you can visit patreon.com/GreggHoush Show. That's Gregg with 3 G's. Housh is Housh, and show you should be able to spell if you're listening to this.
Let's be specific that where the G's are.
Yeah, that's true. I get confused on that sometimes.
GreggHoushShow.
Greg!
If you go to my Twitter, if you go to our website, we have it linked, and even $1 a month is going to help us greatly. So please help all you can, and that's the show for today, everybody. Thanks for listening.
The GreggHoush Show was created by GreggHoush, executive produced by co-host Derek Gowrays, and co-hosted by Kayla Avery. Other contributors include producer and writer Anna Jeffrey, co-host producer David McGuffin, and writer-engineer Robert Tortora. Theme music for this show was produced and recorded by Geneva de Colbert. Our interns include co-host Casey McLaughlin, writer-engineer Alec Greeny, writer Maddie LoCicero, and associate producer, writer, and announcer William Kennedy. You're listening to New Revolutionary Radio, your call to action. Thank you for listening. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at GreggHoush Show and on Instagram at GreggHoush. If you like what you've heard and want to be a part of it, check out patreon.com/GreggHoush Show. In exchange for funding our programming, you gain access to exclusive content such as uncut editions of our podcast. We have new episodes every Thursday night. We hope you listen in.